The night felt special from the very beginning. The Halloween charity Gala was one of the biggest events of the year, filled with bright lights, famous faces, creative costumes, and the sound of cameras flashing like a river of stars. People laughed, posed, clapped, and tried to look perfect for the world that watched them. But hidden beneath the costumes and lights, a quiet truth lived like a soft shadow. Not every smile in that room was real, and not every heart in that crowd felt celebrated. Some people came there to be seen. Others came to hide, and one person came with a kindness the world did not know yet. From the moment Sandra Bullock entered, something about her felt different. She was dressed like a friendly storybook witch. Nothing scary, nothing loud, just a simple costume with soft colors and a gentle smile. Other guests wore huge wings, masks covered in jewels, glowing outfits, and some even arrived with personal photographers. But Sandra slipped through the entrance without trying to shine. She waved, greeted people, hugged the volunteers, and whispered thank you to every staff member who helped her. She always did that. And everyone loved her because she never acted like a queen, even though the world treated her like one. Keanu Reeves arrived a little later, wearing a clean and simple black suit with a small mask in his hand. He never liked attention or costumes, but he came because the event was not just a party. It was a charity fundraiser to help children with long-term illnesses. That was the only reason he ever attended these things. He was not there for interviews or flashes. He was there because kindness was a language he understood better than fame. The moment Keanu walked in, people noticed. Not because he tried to be noticed, but because his presence always felt calm and real in a room full of noise. Sandra waved at him from across the hall. For a second, they looked like two old friends who did not need words to understand each other. They had known each other for many years, not as actors, but as people who survived the same storms of fame and still held their hearts together. When Keanu reached her, she smiled, but it was not her usual bright smile. It was softer, deeper, almost like she was carrying a thought she could not put into words. "You made it," Sandra said, her voice warm but tired. "Of course," Keanu replied. "You think I would miss this?" She laughed lightly, but there was something behind her eyes. A secret, maybe, or a sadness, or both. They walked together through the crowd. People clapped when they saw them. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered. Everyone loved seeing them together. They were a reminder of what respect looked like in a world that often forgot. But Keanu was not looking at the cameras. He was looking at Sandra, and he could feel something was wrong. She was present, but her mind was somewhere else. She kept looking at the exit doors every few minutes. She checked her small watch more than once. She held her hands tightly when nobody was watching. It was not nervousness. It was something deeper, like she was waiting for the right moment to disappear. Keanu leaned closer and spoke softly. "You seem distant." "Everything fine?" Sandra paused. Her smile faded a little. She looked at him with gentle eyes, almost as if she wanted to tell him something but could not. "Just thinking," she said. "Sometimes the heart remembers things the world forgets." Keanu did not fully understand, but he nodded. He knew Sandra carried many quiet stories behind her public life. She never liked sharing her pain. She always tried to protect others from worry. Even when she needed help, she chose silence. They were interrupted when a young boy rolled his wheelchair near them. He was wearing a tiny superhero cape. His eyes sparkled with excitement. Not because of the party, but because he recognized Sandra. She knelt down to his level, held his hand, and asked his name as if he was the only person in the entire room. The boy told her he was 5 and he loved magic tricks. Sandra pulled a small coin from behind his ear, made him laugh, and told him he was already a hero, because heroes are the ones who keep smiling even when life feels heavy. The boy hugged her. Sandra hugged him back tightly, longer than necessary. When she stood again, her eyes were watery, but she blinked it away with a practiced grace. Keanu noticed every detail. He walked with her to the balcony where the crowd noise faded and only music from inside could be heard. The city lights below looked like tiny stars lost in motion. Sandra leaned on the railing, took a slow breath, and looked up at the sky. She always did that when she wanted to calm her heart. "Sometimes I feel like the world expects me to be everywhere," she said quietly. But there are places that need me more than all this." Keanu looked at her, waiting. She did not continue. He wanted to ask more, but he did not push her. He respected silence. He knew some answers only arrived when the heart was ready to speak. Inside, the host announced the next segment of the event. A huge applause echoed through the hall. Sandra straightened herself, smiled weakly, and said, "I should stand with the others." But then she added something unusual. "If I leave early, don't worry. Some people need the night more than I do." Keanu froze at her words. It felt like a goodbye, hidden inside a sentence. Before he could question her, she walked back inside. The crowd swallowed her. Her costume blended among bright masks and gowns. She kept smiling, greeting, waving, but there was something quiet in her steps, almost like she was counting them. Keanu stayed near the balcony for a moment, thinking. His heart felt unsettled. It was not fear, but a strange sense of unspoken truth. Something was about to change. He could feel it the same way a person feels rain coming even under a clear sky. Then it happened. 20 minutes later, the host called Sandra's name to join the stage for a special thank you speech. Everyone turned, clapped, and waited for her to walk up with her gentle grace. But she did not come. The applause slowed. Whispers grew louder. People looked around the hall. The cameras searched for her face, expecting her to appear from a doorway or a corner. She was not there. Her chair was empty. Her phone was gone. Her costume cloak no longer. Hung on the back of the seat. She had left the hall. Without a sound, Keanu stood up instantly. His heart beat faster. Not because of panic, but because he knew Sandra well enough to understand something was not right. She would never disappear from a charity event without reason. Not her. He walked to the side exit. The staff told him they did not see her leave. The security team checked the stage hallway. Nothing. The parking area was full of cars, but hers was still in place. No driver had taken her. No assistant had followed her. She had walked out alone, and that was when Keanu realized the truth. Sandra Bullock was gone, and nobody knew why. The moment Sandra's absence was confirmed, the air inside the gala changed. The music kept playing. The lights kept flashing. And the host tried to continue speaking, but something invisible cracked in the atmosphere. It was the kind of silence that does not need words to be heard. People felt it, even if they could not explain it. Some guests assumed she went backstage. Some assumed she was fixing her costume. Others thought she was avoiding the cameras. Nobody felt worried yet, except Keanu. He stepped away from the crowd and walked toward the back hallway of the building. His footsteps were steady, but his mind raced with quiet questions. He replayed every detail of the last hour. Her smile that looked too heavy. Her words that sounded like a farewell. The way she glanced at the exits again and again. And that one line she said so softly it almost disappeared in the noise. "If I leave early, don't worry." But he did worry. He checked the service door near the kitchen. It was slightly open, almost as if someone walked through without fully closing it. The lock was not broken. No sign of struggle. Just a simple exit, leading to a quiet street behind the gala hall. A place with no cameras, no crowds, no attention. He pushed the door and stepped outside. Cold air brushed against his face. The night was calm, almost too calm. No sound of cars, no footsteps, no voices, just the distant hum of the city far away. He looked around slowly, searching for any sign that she had walked this way, and then he noticed it, a small black bracelet on the ground. He picked it up. It was simple, handmade, the kind of thing a child might give as a gift. He had seen Sandra wearing it earlier in the night. She had touched it once when she was talking to the boy in the wheelchair. She said it was from a friend who never asks for anything. If it was here, it meant she walked through this door. Keanu looked further. The pavement had faint marks, like soft drag lines, not heavy enough for a car or equipment, but clear enough to suggest movement. Then, near the corner wall, something caught his eye. A paper taped to the bricks. Not a letter, not a message. Just a small drawing made with crayons. A smiling woman holding a glowing pumpkin. Above it, a short sentence written in a child's handwriting. "Thank you, Miss Sandra, for the magic night." It was not a clue. It was a sign. Sandra was not running from something. She was running to something. Keanu knew the gala was not her final destination. She had walked toward a different purpose. Something hidden. something she had kept secret from the world for a long time. He looked up at the night sky and took a slow breath. The world saw Sandra Bullock as a star, but stars do not always shine on stage. Sometimes they shine in places nobody thinks to look. He went back inside the hall, but this time he did not sit. He scanned the room. Every face, every door, every direction. He was not searching randomly. He was following instinct, the same calm instinct that guided him through storms many times before. He found one of the event volunteers and asked if Sandra said anything before leaving. The volunteer paused, trying to remember. She asked if we had extra cupcakes. The girl said, "Not for here." She said she needed them for somewhere else, somewhere quiet. That was all Keanu needed. He walked outside again, this time with a destination forming in his mind. He remembered a conversation they once had months ago when they were filming something in a small town. She had talked about a place she visited sometimes. Not a studio, not a charity hall, not a hospital with cameras waiting. A little hospice for children. A place where kids fought battles too big for their age. A place she said felt like a candle in a world that forgets to look at the dark. She never told him the address, but she mentioned it was close to the city and always decorated with hand-painted stars. If she left this gala, it was not to disappear. It was to go where kindness had no audience. Keanu got into his car and drove. The roads were quiet. The city lights slowly faded as the buildings grew smaller. He did not drive fast. He drove with purpose. And with every mile, he remembered more conversations, small details, pieces of her truth that meant nothing before, but now felt like puzzle parts finally fitting. He remembered how she said the world celebrates the loudest people, but the real heroes live in silence. He remembered how she once spent her entire birthday not at a party, but with a group of kids who had no visitors. He remembered how she refused to let anyone take pictures there. Some things lose meaning when the world claps for them, she said. Real kindness is quiet. The road turned into a narrow lane. Trees on both sides. A small white building appeared ahead, almost hidden, as if the world had forgotten it existed. No signboard. No bright lights. But the entrance was decorated with glowing paper pumpkins and tiny handmade stars hanging from strings. Keanu parked the car and stepped out. The night felt different. Here, softer, honest, like the place carried both pain and hope at the same time. He walked to the entrance, and before he could knock, he heard laughter. Small, light, fragile laughter from inside. Laughter that sounded like it was fighting against sickness, but still choosing joy. He opened the door slowly, and there she was. Sandra Bullock, sitting on the floor, not in a party gown, not in red carpet beauty, but wearing a small clown nose and colorful gloves, holding a cupcake in one hand and a puppet in the other. Her costume witch hat was gone. Her makeup had smudged from smiling too much. Every child around her was looking at her like she was the only light inside a long night. She was not missing. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Keanu stood there silently, watching, not as an actor, not as a star, but as a man who understood that the greatest fame is the one that needs no audience. The children saw him first and waved. Sandra turned and froze for a second. Not in fear, not in shock, but in a quiet realization that someone had finally found the truth she had been hiding for years. She smiled gently. "You followed me," she said, soft as a whisper. "I was worried," Keanu replied. Sandra looked down, then back at the children, then at him. "This is where I go when the world is too loud," she said. "They don't know who I am. They don't care about awards. They just want stories and laughter and a little bit of love." Keanu walked closer, slowly, respectfully. He did not ask questions. He did not lecture her for leaving. He understood. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked quietly. She looked at the little girl sitting beside her, gently braiding Sandra's hair with shaky fingers. 10 years, she said. Every Halloween, every birthday, every time the world expects me to shine somewhere else. Keanu nodded. His heart was full, but his voice stayed calm. "And nobody knows." "That is the point," she said. The children hugged her again. Keanu sat beside them. No cameras, no crowd, no fame, just kindness. But before the moment could settle, something shifted. A nurse walked in and whispered something in Sandra's ear. Her face changed. A shadow crossed her expression. The way she stood up made Keanu realize something was wrong, and that was when the real twist began. A child nearby fainted. The room froze. The nurse rushed. Sandra held the child, calling his name softly, her voice cracking. Keanu stood up, ready to help, but unsure how. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was fear. And part 2 ended not with answers, but with a new question. Not why she disappeared, but what she had been silently fighting for all these years. The room that was full of soft laughter only moments ago now felt like it had stopped breathing. The little boy who fainted lay still in Sandra's arms, his small head resting against her shoulder. The nurse checked his pulse with calm hands, but her eyes showed worry she was trying hard to hide. The other children watched in silence, gripping their blankets and toys, their joy replaced with fear they knew too well. It was not the first time they had seen a friend collapse. Sickness lived in this place like an invisible shadow. Every child here fought something heavy, something they could not escape by simply wishing harder. And Sandra knew that better than anyone. Keanu stood near the table, frozen, feeling the weight of a moment he had never expected. On film sets, danger is controlled. Scripts are edited. Pain is pretend. But here, everything was real, raw, and unstoppable. He had spent years acting in stories where he could save people with courage and strength. But this was different. This was a world where bravery did not always win, and kindness did not always heal the body, only the heart. Sandra placed the boy gently on a small bed the nurse prepared. She held his hand and whispered something to him, her voice breaking like paper tearing. When the nurse injected calm medicine into his small arm, the boy began to breathe slowly again, but he did not wake. His chest moved, but his eyes stayed closed. The nurse finally spoke. "He will sleep, but his body is tired, more tired than it should be." Sandra nodded, but her face showed a pain deeper than fear. It was the pain of someone who already knew this day would come, and had been trying to delay it with love. Keanu stepped closer. "Can I help?" he asked softly. Sandra looked at him the way someone looks at a door they are afraid to open. Not because they fear what is behind it, but because they fear what the world will think when it finally swings wide. "Just stay," she whispered. So he stayed. He pulled a chair and sat beside her. No camera, no script, no applause waiting outside. Only a quiet truth glowing like a candle in the dark. Minutes passed in stillness. The children slowly returned to their drawings, their toys, their soft whispers. But their eyes stayed on Sandra, like she was their safety switch. The only adult who could turn fear into comfort with nothing but a gentle voice. Keanu looked around the room and noticed something strange. There were photos on the wall, but not of celebrities, not of donors, not of awards or flashy events, just pictures of the children, smiling, painting, holding cupcakes, wearing paper crowns. And in almost every photo, there was a woman in a costume, always disguised, always different, always hidden. Sometimes a fairy, sometimes a doctor, sometimes a magician, but always Sandra. He walked closer to the wall, studying one photo in silence. A little girl with an oxygen tube was laughing while Sandra held a puppet beside her. Nobody looking at the picture would know she was a Hollywood icon. She was just a woman who helped a child forget pain for one moment. That was when Sandra joined him. "You see why I leave the red carpets early?" she said, her voice quiet but steady. "You never wanted credit," Keanu replied. "Credit is loud," she said. "Kindness should be quiet." He turned toward her fully now. "If this means so much to you, why keep it a secret for 10 years? Her eyes softened, but her answer was not fast. She took a breath before speaking, and when she did, it was gentle but sharp as truth. Because if the world knew, it would stop being kindness. It would become image, headlines, interviews, gossip. And then the kids would no longer be people. They would become stories, and I will never let their pain become entertainment. Keanu understood, more than she knew. He looked around once more. "How many people know about this place?" he asked. "Very few," she replied. "The founder, the nurses, and one anonymous donor who sends money every month. That is all." Keanu thought for a moment. "The donor is you." She smiled a tired smile. "They do not need to know who I am. They just need medicine, blankets, food, light. That is enough." Before Keanu could respond, the door opened again. An older woman in a soft gray cardigan walked in, wiping her hands on a towel. Her face lit up when she saw Sandra like she was greeting her own daughter. "I should have known you would leave the gala," she said warmly. Sandra hugged her. "You know I always do." The woman turned to Keanu. "You must be Keanu. She talks about you sometimes." He raised a brow. "Does she?" Sandra blushed slightly. "Only the good parts." The woman smiled. "Thank you for coming. Most people never step inside this world unless someone forces them." Keanu shook his head slowly. "I was not forced. I was guided." The woman nodded like she understood. "Then stay as long as you wish. We never have enough gentle hearts in this place." She went to check the boy who fainted, and for a while the room fell into a quiet rhythm again. But Keanu's mind kept moving. Sandra had lived a double life for years. The world saw fame, success, jokes on talk shows, and shining awards. But while the cameras chased her, she chased something else. The last smiles of children who might not see another Halloween. The hands of parents who were too tired to stand. The small victories that never made headlines. Keanu took a slow breath. "Why did you pretend everything was normal?" "At the gala tonight," he asked. Sandra looked down. "Because people only like the happy version of life. If I walked in and talked about pain, they would change the topic. But if I smile and wear a costume, they celebrate. So I do what they expect, and then I leave. And I come here where people do not need perfection. They just need presence." Keanu leaned in a little closer. "But you are carrying this alone." Her eyes met his. "No," she whispered. "I carry it with them." She pointed at the children. "And one day, I will not be able to come. But until that day, I will not waste a single night pretending the world is fine when it is not." Keanu took in her words like a lesson he wished he had learned earlier in life. But before the emotion could settle, a voice came from the corner. A little girl with short hair and tired eyes spoke softly. "Miss Sandra, are you coming tomorrow too?" Sandra knelt beside her. "Of course. I will always come back." The girl hugged her. "Even if you disappear." The words hit Keanu like a quiet shock. The children already knew Sandra disappeared often. She was not missing. She was chosen by them. She was their safe ghost. The angel without wings, the visitor without cameras. But there was something in the girl's voice that felt heavier, like she had heard adults talking. Like she knew Sandra's visits were not guaranteed forever. And that was when Keanu finally understood the real fear in Sandra's eyes. She was not afraid of being discovered. She was afraid of running out of time. Maybe her health. Maybe her schedule. Maybe her heart breaking from holding too much. But something was slipping. Before he could ask, the nurse called Sandra again. The boy was waking up. Sandra rushed to him and held his hand. His eyes opened slowly, and the first thing he did was smile at her. Not because she was famous. Because she was there. Keanu watched them. Then he made a decision. The kind you do not speak about. The kind you act on. When Sandra walked back, he looked at her and said, "You are not doing this alone anymore." She blinked. "Keanu." "No," he said softly but firmly. "You have been giving for 10 years in silence. Let me carry at least one corner of this with you." She stared at him, and her eyes filled, not with sadness, but with the kind of relief people feel when someone finally sees the weight they hid. But before either of them could continue, the door opened again. This time, a doctor walked in, with news that would change everything, and the suspense in the room rose once again. The doctor entered the room with a calm expression, but his eyes carried the kind of truth that does not arrive with comfort. The children did not notice. They were busy drawing, playing, or watching Sandra with quiet admiration, but the adults felt the air shift. The nurse stepped back. The older woman in the cardigan folded her hands tightly. Sandra stood still, waiting for the words she already feared. Keanu watched everything in silence, sensing the storm before the thunder. The doctor spoke softly, not wanting to frighten the children. "Sandra, can we talk for a moment?" She nodded and followed him to a small room near the hallway. Keanu hesitated, but Sandra looked back at him and gave a gentle signal, the kind that said you can come if you want, so he followed. Inside, the doctor closed the door. The room was small, with a wooden desk, medical files, and a soft lamp glowing in the corner. It smelled like clean sheets and hope that was always fighting time. "What happened?" Sandra asked. The doctor took a slow breath. "The boy who fainted." He paused, choosing words with compassion. "His condition is getting worse. The treatment is working slower than before. We tried adjusting the medicine, but his body is not responding the way we hoped." Sandra's face changed, not with shock, but with the kind of pain that only comes from loving people you cannot save. "How long?" she whispered. The doctor looked down. "Maybe weeks, maybe less." She closed her eyes for a second, and Keanu saw her hold every emotion inside her like a dam trying not to break. "Does he know?" she asked. "No," the doctor said, "but he is starting to feel it." Sandra nodded. "Then we give him more joy than fear. Every day, every hour." The doctor placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have been doing that for years, Sandra. More than anyone." She smiled at him, but it was the kind of smile made of glass. When they left the room, Sandra walked slowly down the hallway. Keanu followed beside her, but he did not speak. He did not ask questions. He just stayed, like she asked before. Finally, she stopped and leaned against the wall, her voice breaking slightly. "Do you know what the hardest part is?" she said. "I am not afraid of losing them. I am afraid they will leave this world without enough memories of joy." Keanu listened closely. "I am not their mother. I am not their family. I am just a visitor in their short story. But if I can give them even one moment where they forget pain, then it matters." She looked at him. "But sometimes I wonder if it is enough." Keanu stepped closer, his voice gentle but steady. "It is not about how long we can save someone. It is about how deeply we can love them before time runs out." She looked at him, and for the first time that night, her eyes filled completely. "I wish everyone thought like that," she whispered. He shook his head slightly. "They will, one day, because of people like you." She smiled softly, and for a moment the silence between them was not heavy. It was healing. But the night was not done, because kindness is never simple. As they walked back into the main room, they saw a few new faces standing near the entrance. Not children, not staff, not volunteers. It was a group of parents, tired, worried, holding bags, jackets, and paperwork. One of the children had taken a sudden turn earlier in the evening, and the parents had arrived after rushing from another town. Their son was not the boy who fainted. This was a different child, a different story, a different pain. The mother looked around the room, confused and overwhelmed. She did not recognize Sandra. She had no idea she was in the presence of someone the world adored. She only knew one thing. Her child was sick. She needed someone to hold her together. Sandra walked to her immediately, no hesitation, no introduction, no distance. She hugged the mother the way a sister would. No words, just warmth. Keanu watched as the woman broke into tears against Sandra's shoulder. This was not acting. This was not fame. This was love doing the simplest, hardest work. After a while, the mother whispered, "Why are you here?" "Who are you?" Sandra smiled gently. "Just someone who loves your child." The woman did not ask again. She did not need to. Keanu stood near the wall, seeing a version of Sandra. The world would never understand through interviews or stage speeches. She was not here to inspire cameras. She was here to restore pieces of people who were breaking, quietly. But something inside him kept echoing. 10 years. She had been doing this for 10 years, and nobody knew. Until now. He walked outside for a moment to take a slow breath. The night air was cool and still. He looked at the sky, the same sky that covered Hollywood premieres and quiet children's hospices at the same time. Fame and pain lived under the same moon. Inside, Sandra sat with the boy who had fainted. The medicine made him sleepy again, but he fought to keep his eyes open. "Why are you still here?" he asked softly. "Because you are here," she replied. "Will you come tomorrow?" "Of course, even if I am gone." Her voice trembled. "Especially then." The boy smiled and drifted back to sleep. Keanu walked back in slowly. Sandra looked up at him from the bedside. For a moment, they spoke only with their eyes, and that was when he finally realized the truth. She was not visiting this place. She was holding it together. For years. Alone. And just when he was about to speak, the older woman in the cardigan approached him quietly. "She has been funding this place in secret," she said. "The toys, the medicine, the art supplies, the food, sometimes even the electricity bill." Keanu turned to her. "All of it?" The woman nodded. "She never wanted her name on anything. She said kindness should not come with a signature." Keanu swallowed a quiet breath. "Sandra is not just helping them," the woman continued. "She is saving us 1 month at a time. If she ever stops, this place will close." And that was the moment Keanu understood something even deeper. The real reason she disappeared from the Gala was not because she was tired of fame. It was because she was running out of time to keep this place alive, and she was carrying that fear in silence. He walked to Sandra again. She sat quietly, holding the boy's hand. "You should not carry this alone," he said. She looked at him, eyes soft but guarded. "I am not sure the world will understand." "Then let me be the one who understands," he said. She hesitated, then asked, "Why are you doing this?" Keanu took a slow breath. "Because you taught me something tonight. The world thinks heroes stand in the spotlight, but sometimes the real ones disappear into the dark to hold the light for someone else." Sandra looked away for a moment, fighting emotion before she could reply. The doctor returned with new papers that would change everything. "We need to talk," he said. "It is about the future of the hospice." Sandra stood. Her heart tightened. Keanu rose with her. The doctor looked at them both. "We only have funds left for 3 more months." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment. Sandra did not react. She already knew, but the children did not, and they could not know. Not yet, the doctor continued. "After that, if we do not find support, we will have to shut this place down." The room felt heavier than death, because death is final, but losing hope, while still alive, is worse. Sandra looked at the sleeping boy. Keanu looked at the stars painted on the wall. Both of them knew this was no longer about one night of kindness. This was a war against time, and kindness was running out of money. Keanu finally spoke. "Then we do not let it close." But the doctor shook his head. "We need more than good intentions. We need a miracle." Keanu's eyes slowly turned toward Sandra. He did not smile. He did not panic. He just said one sentence. "Then we create one." The word miracle settled in the room like a fragile candle flame. No one spoke for a few seconds. The doctor looked tired, the nurse looked defeated, and the older woman in the cardigan looked like she had already learned how to smile through heartbreak. Only the children remained unaware, living inside the small pocket of peace Sandra had built for them. Sandra stood very still. She had heard this news before, more than once. Every year the hospice reached the edge of closing, and every year she found a way to pull it back from the cliff without telling anyone. She sold things, donated quietly, negotiated with labs, and even refused certain film roles just so she could keep paying for medicine no reporter ever wrote about. But this time was different. The world outside was changing fast. Donations were slowing. Medical costs were rising. Her own life was not as simple as it looked to the public, and now Keanu knew the truth. She finally turned to him. "This is not your burden," she said softly. Keanu shook his head. "Burden is the wrong word. This is a responsibility, and you have been carrying it alone for too long." She wanted to argue, but her voice didn't come. She was tired. Not from the work, but from the loneliness of quiet kindness. Doing good in silence is noble, but it is also heavy. And for the first time in 10 years, someone was offering to hold even a small part of that weight. The doctor placed the file on the table. We have 74 days left, he said. After that, we start losing staff, treatments, and finally, the building. Sandra looked at the children again. 74 days. 74 mornings of cartoons. 74 nights of bedtime stories. 74 moments to pretend sickness was not winning. Keanu broke the silence. How much is needed to save it? The doctor hesitated. A little over 2 million. Keanu did not react with shock, only with thought. And how much to keep it alive for years, not months. More than 5. A normal person would have walked away. Keanu did not. Instead, he sat down beside Sandra and spoke with a calm voice that sounded more like a promise than an idea. We are not asking the world to care. We are going to build something that makes them care. Sandra looked at him again, unsure where his mind was heading. You do not want attention? Keanu continued. So we will not do it through attention. We will do it through impact. She listened. People donate to causes when they feel connected, he said. But most of the world never gets to feel what I felt tonight. They don't see the children. They don't see the joy you create. They don't see the truth. They only see headlines and numbers. Sandra nodded slowly. So what are you suggesting? Keanu leaned forward. We are going to build a kindness chain, not a fundraiser, not a campaign, a living stream of help, one that never uses your name or mine, one that is bigger than us. The older woman spoke softly. But we do not have time to build something so big. The clock is already running. Keanu turned to Sandra. Then we start tomorrow. Sandra sighed, conflicted. You don't understand. If this becomes public, people will turn it into news, gossip, drama. They will ask why I hid it. They will make it about my image instead of the children. Keanu nodded. Then we do it anonymously. Silently. The same way you kept this place. Alive all these years? She studied his face, as if trying to find a reason to doubt him. She didn't find one. But before she could speak again, more laughter echoed from the back room. 2 little girls were decorating paper pumpkins with tiny glowing stickers. One of them waved at Sandra. Miss Sandra, we saved a place for you. Her voice cracked just slightly when she answered. I am coming, sweetheart. She turned back to Keanu. These kids do not need fame. They need future. Keanu nodded slowly. And they will have one. Sandra hesitated for one last moment, then finally asked, Why are you doing this with me? Keanu's reply was simple, honest and without any performance, because you were right. Real heroes disappear into the dark so others can stand in the light. And someone should stay beside them there so they do not disappear alone. Her eyes softened, almost breaking. You know this might fail, she said. Then we fail trying to save something that deserves to live, he answered. She took a long breath, then nodded. All right, she whispered. Let us try. And with that, a silent agreement formed. Not a contract, not a plan, but a promise. A promise sealed not by applause, not by cameras, but by 2 people who knew that kindness was not charity. It was responsibility. Just then, the small boy who fainted earlier opened his eyes again and whispered, Miss Sandra, are you still here? She brushed his hair gently. I am here, she said, and I am not going anywhere. Keanu stood beside them, watching the moment the same way someone watches a sunrise, in silence, knowing it changes everything without making a sound. But in the hallway, the file with the hospice expense sheet still waited. 74 days. Time was ticking, and Part 5 ended not with fear, but with the first step toward the miracle they needed. The next morning began before sunrise. The hospice was quiet. The children still asleep, and the hallways glowed with small night lights shaped like stars. Sandra sat in the little kitchen with a warm cup of tea held between her hands. There was no costume, no makeup, and no cameras, only truth. She looked at the calendar on the wall and counted the days in her mind. She whispered to herself that this place could not be allowed to die. Soft footsteps approached. Keanu walked in wearing the same clothes from the night before. He had not gone home and he had not slept. He sat across from her with calm eyes and a steady heart. She asked if he was really still there. He said he had promised to stay. They did not need many words. They understood each other in silence. The older woman in the cardigan entered with a folder full of records, bills, and notes. She set it on the table and said they would need to see everything if they were serious. There were no secrets here, only reality. Keanu opened the folder and saw the costs of time. Medications, oxygen tanks, therapy, food, and repairs. There were also hand-drawn cards from children that said thank you to the kind stranger. Sandra looked at the files not as numbers but as lives. Keanu closed the folder and said they were not saving a building. They were buying time for the children to live and smile. The woman nodded and said that time was expensive. Keanu looked at Sandra and said, then they should buy as much as they could. For the first time in 10 years, Sandra let someone else inside her secret. Keanu started calling people who believed in quiet help. He did not call the media. He did not call loud sponsors. He reached out to artists, teachers, doctors, retired volunteers, and people who gave without wanting their names on a wall. Each call began with the same line. He said he was not asking for attention. He was asking for kindness. Sandra made a list of everything the hospice needed. She went through each child's file one by one to make sure nothing was missed. She listed medicine, equipment, fresh food, new beds, gentle shoes, and better blankets. She also listed hours for more nurses, hours for play therapy, and hours for rest. She wrote the word hours several times because she knew that time was the most valuable gift here. A small turn of fate arrived from a place nobody expected. The little girl who once braided Sandra's hair used the hospice tablet to post a simple drawing on a quiet community page. It showed a woman with a clown nose holding cupcakes while children laughed around her. She did not write any names. She did not mention a city. Under the drawing, she wrote, "Please do not let our home close." The post was innocent and honest. A nurse shared it. A teacher shared it. A small podcast read it aloud. People began asking where the place was and how they could help. There were no headlines and no drama. There was only a gentle question passing from one heart to another. Why do we wait for tragedy before we care? Keanu showed the post to Sandra. She smiled with wet eyes. He said they still did not know it was her. She said good, and asked that the story should matter more than any name. Messages began to arrive quietly. A father wrote that his daughter spent her last days at the hospice and that he never knew who kept the lights on. He asked how he could help. A baker offered to send fresh bread each week. A carpenter offered to fix the roof for free. A nurse offered to volunteer extra hours. A student sent $5 and wrote that it was all she had. Kindness did not arrive as one wave. It arrived as many small drops. The drops began to form rivers. 2 weeks later, Sandra returned to the hospice with boxes of supplies. Keanu brought new heaters, fresh blankets, and gentle shoes for small feet. Volunteers painted the walls that held so many quiet tears. The children watched with shining eyes. One boy asked Keanu if he was a superhero too. Keanu knelt and said no and pointed toward Sandra and said he was helping one. The boy nodded and said she saves us. Sandra tried to hide her tears, and for the first time she allowed them to fall. They were not tears of pain. They were tears of relief because she was no longer alone. After a month, the doctor gathered everyone in the common room. The children sat on beanbags with paper stars in their hands. Parents stood along the walls. Nurses and volunteers waited with quiet hope. The doctor announced that there were now enough funds to keep the hospice open for the next 5 years, and that more help was still arriving. The room filled with soft applause. The children cheered. Sandra closed her eyes and let the sound move through her like a warm light. Keanu whispered that she had done it. She shook her head and said we did it, and added that every hidden heart helped. The older woman smiled and said the world believes. Heroes walk stages and hold trophies, but the real heroes walk hallways and hold hands in silence. Sandra looked at the children and said they should keep walking. The evening settled into calm. Parents talked softly with staff. Volunteers cleaned brushes and cups. The stars on the ceiling glowed like small promises that would not go out tonight. When most families had gone home, the lobby grew quiet. Sandra stood in front of the wall of drawings. They showed cupcakes, paper crowns, and small smiles. Keanu walked to her with a single cupcake and one candle. He said it was a celebration for 10 years of silent kindness, and for the next 10 years, too. She blew out the candle and did not make a wish. She made a promise to keep coming back. The boy who had fainted on the first night walked slowly toward them. His color looked better and his breath was steady. He took Sandra's hand and said he was getting stronger. She told him he was brave. He looked at Keanu and asked if he would stay. Keanu said he was not going anywhere. The boy smiled and said that heroes should stay. Keanu looked at Sandra and said the real hero was already here. She lowered her head with an honest smile that came from the deepest place. For the first time in many years, she let herself be seen not as a star, but as a human who chose kindness over applause. A soft wind moved through the open window, and the paper stars on the thread began to sway. The room did not feel like a charity hall anymore. It felt like a home. The fear of running out of time had shifted into a plan for more days and more nights, and more gentle moments where children could laugh without needing a reason. The miracle that everyone thought they needed did not fall from the sky. It rose from many small hands and many quiet decisions to care. The Halloween Gala would happen again in another year. Cameras would flash and a stage would shine. Some people would come to be seen. Some would come to hide. And one person would leave quietly before the applause ended. She would step into the night, carry a box of cupcakes, and walk through a door that did not need her name. There would be no headlines and no crowd. Only children who called her the lady who brings light. The truth was simple and powerful. She had never disappeared. She had always been exactly where love was needed most. And this time she did not stand there alone.